supervisor is Silvia Bertarelli, which is an international economist in Ferrara. My work here is about my first and second year PhD activity, and it could be summarized as heterogeneous firms, export and pollution tax, does the abatement technology matter? So I'm going to explain you first what is the aim of the research, then a very brief overview of the literature, in the existing literature. I try to not annoying you with my theoretical model, and I explain you some results and the next step of the research. So first of all, it is important to understand which is the aim of my research. I begin with the overview of the literature on the Porter hypothesis, where Porter's hypothesis is the linkage between a more stringent environmental regulation, innovation, and firms' performance, which could be measured in different ways. So, at micro level, the Porter hypothesis evidence is very different. So I begin to ask me why there is some different results about the Porter hypothesis at micro level. And I try to think about the heterogeneity among firms. So my aim is, could the heterogeneity of firms play a relevant role in the relationship between environmental regulation and innovation? The first step of the research was the construction of the theoretical model of international trade with heterogeneous firms, with the objective of explaining the relationship between environmental regulation, abatement technology adoption, and firms' exporting decisions. So, specifically, I would like to answer to three questions. First of all, what is the relationship between the productivity of a firms and the pollution tax? And what can happen if all firms adopt a dirty technology, and how the government could reduce emissions? The second one, what happens if I introduce the possibility for firms of use a clean technology, an abatement technology? And the last one, what is the effect of different types of abatement technology on the productivity and thus on the firm exporting decision and their level of emissions? Two are the branches of literature that are very relevant in my project are two. The first one is related to the Porter hypothesis, which is an idea that brings at the beginnings of the 90s. There are so much researchers that treat this kind of literature. A group of researchers studied the direct relationship between environmental policy and environmental regulation. Another part of researchers studied the indirect relationship between environmental policy and firms' performance through the use of environmental innovation. And another part of researchers studied both these two types of relationship. The second branch, which is very important, is the branch is represented by works that analyze the environmental issue within the Malus model, which is an international trade model that considered heterogeneity between firms. And the three most important works for my research were represented by Kock et al., 4sd et al., and Kock et al. So now it is important to understand what is the contribution of my research to the existing literature. Concerning the first branches of the literature, the second branches of the literature, for example, Kock et al. And 4sd et al., we both use environmental tax as environmental regulation, but they focus attention on the relationship between abatement investment and productivity and the level of emission, while I'm more interested in the different abatement technology and its relation with productivity and exporting capacity. Concerning the Kock et al. And compare it with my research, we both reinterpreted the technological adoption of Bustos model, which is the Malus model with the introduction of technology inside, as adoption of different environmental technologies. We both are interested in relationship between exporting decision, productivity, and technology adoption to account for the firm's heterogeneity, but they use emission permits as environmental regulation, while I'm using environmental tax. And they split technology between dirt and clean, and I split the technology into 3 different types of technology: dirty, clean type 1, and clean type 2, that I'm going to explain you which are the differences between clean type 1 and clean type 2. Concerning the Porter hypothesis literature, we both want to explain the connection between environmental regulations and innovation and its effect on firms' performance. But a huge part of the literature is concentrated on macro or sectoral level, while I would like to understand what happened at micro level, at firms level. And finally, I think that the higher part of the contribution is represented by the consideration of the heterogeneity of firms inside this work. So, very briefly, what is the theoretical model? We have to make some assumption both from production and consumption side. It's a very simple model with, for now, extreme assumption. So we suppose to live in a world where there is a higher number of heterogeneous firms that produce differentiated goods. Labor is the only factor of production. The production of 1 unit of good generates 1 unit of pollution, and there are 2 markets, domestic and foreign, that face the same demand, but selling in a foreign market requires higher cost than selling in domestic market. Firms could decide to use between 3 types of technology: dirty, clean type 1, and clean type 2. And we suppose that dirty firms are the only firms that produce pollution, so they have to pay a pollution tax for each unit of pollution they emit. And the differences between clean type 1 and clean type 2 technology, they are abatement technology, and we suppose that they don't pay any kind of pollution tax, and they differ only in fixed and variable cost, and the composition of variable cost. From the consumption side, all consumers are identical and firms face the same demand. What are the results? Concerning the first answer, the first question of my research, if we suppose to live in a situation where all firms adopt dirty technology, we can say that the pollution tax increases the marginal productivity of firms. So more firms leave the market because there is higher selection of firms inside the market, and so we can say that there is a direct relationship between tax and cut-off productivity of dirty firms, where cut-off productivity is the level of productivity that gives 0 profit to firms. The pollution tax could be used by the government in order to reduce emissions, because increasing the tax, these productive firms, so the more polluting one, leave the market. If we suppose to introduce into our world the possibility for firms to adopt both or a dirty technology or a clean technology of type 1 and type 2, we can say that a high value of environmental tax bring firms to adopt a clean type technology. Higher fixed cost of a clean type technology can compensate the payment of environmental tax. This happens also if we consider a clean type technology too, with difference in fixed and variable cost. But the most important thing is that for a low value of the environmental tax, we could have into the market different type of firms that could decide on the basis of their productivity. Firms that retire from the market, some firms that adopt dirty technology and supply their product to the domestic market, or also clean firms that adopt clean technology and serve both domestic and foreign market. Finally, if we consider all the type of technology, we can say that the decision about the abatement technology and trade, thus the effect of environmental emission, depend on the trade-off between variable and fixed cost, on the value of the environmental tax, and on the productivity. but we are sure that the least productive firms are dirty. Now we are going to empirically test this model in order to understand if the heterogeneity of firms among firms could explain the difference in evidence about the Porter hypothesis. We have availability of the Community Innovation Survey from Eurostat of 2008, and we want to focus on the manufacturing firms. And in our model, we have to consider some econometrical issues, such as the nonlinearity of the model, because our dependent variable is a dummy variable that is represented by the probability of exporting, the endogeneity of environmental innovation measure, and the collinearity among sector and environmental regulations. Thank you for the attention.
I was wondering if you are thinking to include also the foreign side of the story when you talk about environmental policy. Because if you talk about trade, the difference, the distance between the domestic stringency, the stringency of the domestic policy and the one of the foreign policy, it's something that
must consider.
At least you should consider, because of course usually when you internalize the cost of environment, you have a higher price, and of course this has an impact on the demand.
Just one comment. The possible criticism that may arise, which is very trivial, is the use of 2008 data. That there is replies that it's very difficult to find micro data regarding environmental innovation adoption. But then you may emphasize, I think, the key value of the paper is the inclusion of the Malith model in Porter hypothesis setting, so that you have a value there. So we have paper. I mean, I just remember a paper by Pierre Monin with data about 1998 published last year. So
I know.
if you in a very top journals, if you emphasize the methodological and theoretical background, it's already a problem. But and I don't know if other people here may have suggestions. You may maybe try to find out some other possible sources. I didn't really looked at the new CIS data.
Yeah, we are looking for. We have asked for them, and they are arriving after a long journey. And we also see for the Eurobarometer, some Eurobarometer survey that are annually, I think so. And there are not every year, so I don't know if we have the possibility to merge all these.
I think there was a question. I have a follow-up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have 3 questions.
Oh my God.
So the first one is, I mean, if I understood like your model, it's a simplified version. It's a simplified model.
Yeah.
But it's as you like we already spoke, it's a partial equilibrium. So the point is that in I mean, I worked on general equilibrium models, and some of the issues and some of the assumptions that you're doing and that you are implementing in your trade merits model, I think that they have already been implemented in general equilibrium framework.
Okay.
So I would recommend you to check the literature of I think there's an Italian called Bosello, I think. Bosello. He works on, he did the CG model on imperfect competition for sure, at least. But I mean, I think that building also on trade literature, there have been several ways to cope. With heterogeneity. So I would recommend you to look at that. Otherwise, I would also ask my colleague Claudio if he knows something, and I can let you know.
Okay.
That's the first one, and actually, it's also related with the empirical part, because like to see really like what is the value added then of the model, seeing if it hasn't been done before, and the relation with the microdata, because you say that you want to do microanalysis, but and you want to look at the field heterogeneity, but I think that if you look it at the sectoral level, are you not already answering the question?
Yeah.
And you just like don't need to care about the field heterogeneity.
Okay.
I don't know. I leave it in the air. I mean, you know, maybe instead of complicating you so much, only with having a sectoral approach, that's it. I mean, Silvia Albrizio, I think she did a very good work. Yeah, I mean, also in the border hypothesis, I also worked on this literature, and it's quite difficult to understand what's in the there is a lot of work on that.
Yeah, a lot.
And to understand what is the value added of each work, it's complicated. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
So, but I think that there is the work of Silvia Albrizio sectorally is also good. And the last question is about the abatement technologies. What do you mean by that? Which technologies are you what are you supposing? Which sector? Is it the manufacturing sector? Is it all the sectors?
All the sectors.
All the
sectors.
sectors.
We are going to see. I think so that in our database the eco-innovation are represented by different aspects, but we consider only the two that are related to the reduction of the use of energy and the reduction of emission, CO2 emissions.
Okay, so you take the data from the CIS, and it's a question of the CIS.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
No.
okay. I see.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then the econometric part of clustering.
We are talking
yeah.
before. Thanks.
Yeah.
One last question. About the heterogeneity of firms. So, what are the dimensions? Is it just these three technologies, or what are the dimensions of the heterogeneity you're talking about?
No, we are talking about heterogeneity in the sense that firms could be different from the exporting point of view. We analyze this heterogeneity not only with firms, with size or sector, but also with their possibility of exporting. So it's a sort of, it's the model that identified the heterogeneity, and then we apply this model in order to explain the Porter hypothesis. It's really tricky, but it's strange. I think that this is the question. What is the measure of the heterogeneity?
What were the measures of heterogeneity? But I understand whether they're exporting or not, how large they are in what sector.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have maybe conflicting advice to the one. I would suggest really looking into the heterogeneity of individual firms and not to go at sector level. Specifically, I mean, if I remember well, the Porter hypothesis, it's all about. It's basically a theory about conversions, right? That's okay. And you expect heterogeneity within that, but a general over time convergence, a tendency of conversion. Which leads me to trying to understand better your data. I would imagine from that you would need to follow individual firms over time to see whether they are converging or not. And from what I understand, your data is very aggregate, so you might have a problem there. I have a solution, don't worry.
Oh, good.
And then second, and I'll come to the solution afterward.
Share the solution. Share the solution.
I did a while ago some similar, not that refined, but really trying to see from environmental tax model, very simple models, what can you say about the innovation impact in terms of the adoption of these technologies. And I think the breakthrough moment for me was when I actually did not consider these individual units as these abstract numbers and things. And was encouraged by my master's thesis supervisor to go and just go and do visits in a couple of companies, and
What
that
happened?
just changed the whole thing. You know,
I know.
and you talk with these environmental managers in individual
Into the-
plants that tell you how they see the process, and you see it completely from another perspective, and that allows you to bring a lot of subtlety to your hypotheses. And so to the solution, you're well acquainted with Thomas Steyer now, right? So maybe we can make this contact, and he has this wonderful database of annualized individual firms in Sweden submitted to an environmental tags. You can follow them now. The data is probably 25 years, so I think it would be potentially something to ask him to.
You may
make.
have better data sets at country level. So thanks for the issues that 95% of research on econometrics of innovation adoption is based on European surveys. European surveys are cross sections, so you have to enter and deal with cross sections.
The
The
novelty here is
Yeah.
going to
No, it's very
down
fine.
to the
Yeah.
It's very good point.
yeah.
On sectors, I also, sorry, if you use sectors, you lose a lot of data, so I don't think, debate that you have data. On Francesco Posello, yes, but it's very difficult type of frameworks because Francesco is using CG models, and then you can apply this theory after the PhD maybe, or interacting with the film and Francesco Posello, but it's another type of story. So thanks for.
Thanks. Thank you so much.